Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Around the Big Ten podcast. I'm Mark Givler, Chip Minnick. Joining me, as always, our pre-spring look around the Big Ten continues team by team. What are the issues? What are the concerns? What are the questions for every Big Ten program as spring football practice gets going here in the next couple of weeks? We are on Maryland. This one's interesting to me for many reasons. For starters, I think – I don't think I'm out of bounds here. I think if we ranked from most safe to least safe in terms of job security in the Big Ten right now, Mike Locksley is probably very, very close to the least safe. He's one of the least safe coaches right now. There's either coaches who are very, very firmly entrenched, or you have other programs with first and second year coaches who are probably going to be a little more patient right now. Mike Locksley's been at Maryland a while now. And I think this is a big year for him, Chip.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I would completely agree with that. I mean, they were within the conference, and, there's no sugarcoating it. They were 1-8. I mean, stop me if you've heard this before. Maryland starts out well, usually in terms of like their non-conference, which is fine. I'm not saying that they play all, cupcakes, but, by and large that they load up on their non-conference schedule usually. And this was since last year was the first year of the non-division Big Ten, like it would be the kind of thing where they would probably capitalize upon wins against other Big Ten East opponents, and then, maybe steal a game against a Big Ten West opponent to get to at least 6 wins. They don't have that anymore. So now, I mean, when it comes to the difficulty of the expanded Big Ten, Maryland is at a true crossroads within the conference, because the addition of the 4 teams from the traditional Pac-12 into the Big Ten has made the overall conference that much stronger. So Maryland has to figure out a way to try and close the gap.
No doubt. And clearly, Mike Locksley, I think, understands this, because he went out, he hires Pep Hamilton as offensive coordinator. And this is our first of 3 things we're going to kind of dive into here. First of all, can Pep Hamilton develop a balanced attack, as you put it? Mm-hmm. Can he develop an efficient offense? And is it too little too late, though? He doesn't have a lot of times you bring in a new coordinator and you say things like, well, let's give him 2 years, let's let him get his guys, or let's have second year in the system is always a big cliche that gets thrown around. Second year in the system. Does he may not have a second year, he has to immediately hit the ground running. Can he do that?
I don't know. I mean, it sounds, I'm not trying to take shots at Pep Hamilton, but when I looked at the press release detailing and defining, how great it is that we've hired Pep Hamilton, and I'm just kind of, ad-libbing there. All of the talk was about his work as a quarterback developer. And I'm not trying to minimize, I'm not trying to suggest that, that's unimportant. To me, that the fundamental issue at Maryland is the fact that, kind of the reason why I phrased the question, can he develop a balanced attack, is that quarterback play. I mean, granted, Maryland lost their starting quarterback this offseason. Billy Edwards Jr. is now at Wisconsin. So that's another topic. But, the fact that we talked about it on a previous podcast, Roman Hemby is now at Indiana. Their best running back, which is kind of, to my point, is what they need, is they need to be able to run the ball. I'm not suggesting, I freely admit, I love to see, as an Ohio State fan, the dynamic passing attack that Ryan Day's been able to implement, during his tenure. But in the back of my mind, just being a traditional Big Ten guy, there's something to be said about 3 yards in a cloud of dust, the idea of being able to run the ball when you want to and when you need to, because I realize that, bad weather is not something that usually kind of crosses the mind of a lot of traditional Big Ten fans until November. But the reality is, okay, what do you do if you wake up and the day of the game that it's pouring down rain and it's not as easy to throw the ball? You need to be able to run the ball. And getting back to my point about Maryland, I'm skeptical about if Pep Hamilton is going to have everything that he needs on that roster to kind of make a well-rounded attack. You know, when they lost Roman Hemby, I mean, their next leading rusher, based on the stats that I see, Nolan Ray, ran for 374 yards in comparison, you know, with Roman Hemby, who had basically double that. You know, so it's going to be interesting to see how Pep Hamilton's able to get everything, you know, hopefully together as the offensive coordinator.
This is a tough task. New quarterback, new running back, in terms of you're replacing your leading rusher. Ty Felton was such a huge part of their offense at receiver.
Right.
He's off to the NFL. Like, you joined a staff that the head coach may only have this year to prove something. He may not have another year to, like, you know, go through some growing pains. I don't see, I'm not trying to come out of the gates like just like everything's terrible at Maryland, but like, what are you hanging your hat on?
Well, I mean, it's one of these things where, you know, maybe, just kind of when it comes to, you know, I realize one of the other things we're going to talk about here, you know, like maybe their transfer addition at quarterback, you know, maybe that's kind of what they're thinking that they can build around. But it's, you know, it's not easy. Like when I look at, you know, from the recruiting side of things, I mean, that they did have, some a talented running back that they added in, you know, by the name of Iverson Howard. But, you know, that's asking a lot. I mean, that's asking a lot for a true freshman to come in and be able to, you know, contribute in the same way that Roman Hemby did. And like I said, we'll be talking about the transfer portal quarterback. But yeah, I mean, not a lot to build around, especially, you know, from an outsider's perspective looking in.
Yeah, I mean, you're hoping maybe like, I don't know, you're hoping like, you know, someone that can come in and give you, like, I'm trying to rack my brain here on like what you're hanging your hat on, and it really is Pep Hamilton getting Justin Martin ready. I mean, that's basically it. And so that'll, you know, we'll go to that, I think,
okay,
next, because I think that's a good segue into that before we talk about our last thing is, you know, topic number 2, question number 2, will Justin Martin emerge as Maryland's best option at quarterback? And what does that mean?
I think, I mean, it's almost a necessity. You know, the fact that, you know, Justin Martin, you know, played sparingly at UCLA, you know, Ethan Garber, you know, had the job, you know, and I have nothing against, you know, like a young man like that looks at the opportunity and says, all right, you know, I want to play, I want to compete, and this presents itself. But again, it's kind of, you know, Billy Edwards Jr., I thought that, you know, he was pretty much between he and Roman Hemby was, you know, obviously like the focal point of that Maryland offense, you know, so he's coming in and he's going to be expected to kind of pick up where Billy Edwards left off. I'm not sure if he's prepared to do that. And it just remains to be seen if there are enough talented pieces around Maryland with regards to like the line, as well as like the receivers and things like that Justin Martin will be prepared to, you know, kind of take over and be dominant at the quarterback position.
Right. And so that'll be, yeah, I mean, that's going to be a huge key because they've lost so much talent via the portal the last like 2 off seasons.
Right.
You know, they brought in MJ Morris last year. He's already gone to Coastal Carolina. Speaking of quarterback here, they lose some guys off their defense. Marcus Dumerville goes to Arkansas. Like there's just so much unknown here on this roster. And it's just one of the rosters I look at and I'm like, I try and do this assessment of like, okay, did they bring in more talent than they lost via the portal? And I think the answer is no.
Right.
And so maybe I'll be proven wrong on that. But to the topic, to the point of Justin Martin is, yeah, like that's a wild, like if Billy Edwards Jr. is back, you at least you have an idea of what you have there. Like you have a pretty good idea of what you have there. Justin Martin is a wild card, and maybe he comes in and lights it up. That's it's possible. But if he doesn't, you went 1-8 in Big Ten play last year with a decent quarterback. Like It's not like, so if you get below decent quarterback play this year, Roman Hemby's gone. Your top receivers, like, what does this look like for Mike Locksley? I think this is desperation time, I think, for this coaching staff. I can't spin it. I want to sit here and like glass half full this thing, but I don't know if I can.
Yeah. And I realize we're going to do, schedule analysis later, but it's one of these things where kind of, one of the things that I said initially about Maryland is that in previous years, it seemed like Maryland, it was kind of like, all right, let's get off to, if not necessarily, an undefeated start, but a good enough start that, and I realize it's probably a clumsy analogy, but it's kind of like almost like coasting in on fumes by the end of the season, that Maryland was just physically depleted, but they had enough to get to, they would have that game. And I realize that this sounds, disparaging about Rutgers, would be like, okay, like if we beat Rutgers, that gets us to 6. And then it's like, okay, exhale. And we're playing in like one of the lower bowl games, but at least we got to a bowl game. I don't think that they can rely on that kind of a strategy anymore, which is why I think I go back to what I said earlier about being at a crossroads, is that Maryland, ever since they made and it's strange to think about, it's been 10 years, ever since they made the move into the Big Ten, it just seems as though like physically that they haven't really been at the same, I guess, the physical level as their counterparts within the conference.
Yeah. Like you said, we'll do the schedule thing after the spring, but I just like spoiler alert, I just browsed it real quick. I've got them as underdogs in all 9 Big Ten games.
Okay. Right there. So, okay.
Like they're easier, like their schedule's fairly challenging, but like their easier opponents are on the road.
So based on that logic, and I'm not disputing it. And again, like you glanced at it,
and maybe look, things can play out.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Like just one quick example. They play at Michigan State at the end of the year. Who knows what both of those teams could look like?
That's right.
Come the end of November. Maybe they're favored in that game. But like right now, would I favor them on the road against Michigan State? No, I wouldn't.
Okay. So, based on that logic, and I'm not disputing, is that, okay, incorporating some of my thinking into what you just described, is that, all right, who is going to emerge as Maryland's running back? Because you and I both know, and our viewers know, what usually happens on the last day of the season when you're playing at Michigan State. It's usually pretty cold and or snowy, right? Mm-hmm. Which is my point, is that, okay, do you have the physical nature and the physical style necessary to be able to go up there and say to Justin Martin, if he's the quarterback, okay, don't worry, like we're gonna rely on fill in the blank to pound the ball and control the clock, and that's how we're going to win this game. I can't sit here, and again, we're many months away. Like you said, it's like we haven't really done the full schedule analysis. We haven't really seen what they look like in spring ball. But I would be skeptical about Maryland being able to do just that.
3 November cold weather road games on the schedule.
That's tough.
Which we will talk about.
That's tough for anybody. That's tough for anybody, but especially for a program that's not really built, by my amateur observation, to really compete in that style.
All right. Our third thing here. There are going to be so few recruiting things that we talk about in these pre-spring previews. This is like almost entirely on the field, current players, things. But this, to me, is unique. They have a commitment right now, Maryland does, from Zion Ely. Opinions vary, like different sites, whatever. Some people believe he's the number 1 player in the country in 2026. I think he's a 5-star. I've seen him at camps. He's legit. He is a 5-star pass rusher, local kid. To me, he represents some type of, whether you want to call it insurance or a buffer of sorts for Mike Locksley's job security. He is going to take official visits to, like, not just to Maryland. He's going to visit like 5 or 6 other programs. He's going to make official visits. That's likely going to drag into the summer. But in the spring, he's going to do unofficial visits and make the rounds. What does that look like? Where is Maryland? What is the temperature with Zion Ealy coming out of the spring? Because one thing I will tell you, if they keep him committed, that's kind of a bargaining chip for Mike Locksley. If Zion Ealy goes to Alabama or Florida or Ohio State or Texas in April, loves it, opens up his recruiting process, like, that's almost like nail in the coffin to me, unless Maryland like surprises and wins 7 or 8 games this year. And I'm not seeing, so like, this is one recruitment that could shape a coach's future, in my opinion. There's not many of these nationally. I think this is a very unique situation, but I think that's the thing. That's our third thing to watch this spring, is where does that recruitment stand here? Can they survive that March through, mid to end of April window where he's probably going to be doing some visits?
Yeah. I mean, I realize that I probably broke protocol here by putting in a recruiting thing, but it was simply because, based on, like when you do like a quick Google search for like Maryland football, that was the top story, is that, supposedly on February 21st, he said that his recruiting is, and I'm going to put it in air quotes, is closed. And as what you just said is that, okay, well, what he said on February 21st may not be applicable in March or April. And to the point about, okay, a bargaining chip, I mean, I think it's going to be highly incumbent upon Mike Locksley and his coaching staff and the team that he has assembled to be able to kind of say like, hey, I've got arguably the top player in the country coming to Maryland, as long as I'm here, or however he wants to, kind of phrase it. But, as well as I do that, like if things get off to a rocky start, Zion Ealy, which would not be surprising, to say, I'm going to reopen my recruiting, my recruitment, and I'm going to visit these other schools. And, so if anything, I think, keeping an eye and ear open for what Zion Ealy does. I know that, not to take us too far off the path, but, Zahir Mathis was a guy that was originally an Ohio State verbal commitment. He signed at the beginning of February, but he's one of those guys that are kind of that old, I don't want to call it an old adage, but that statement about when it comes to NIL now in the transfer portal is that you basically have to recruit your guys every season. So if Maryland has a lackluster season again, you're going to tell me that Zion Ealy is going to stick with his recruitment and Zahir Mathis isn't going to possibly, contemplate entering the transfer portal? I mean, it just seems as though, like you said, that Mike Locksley in a very, very precarious situation.
Yeah, the Ealy recruitment has been a roller coaster. Like, I think that was obviously a huge early pickup for them. I don't think people saw it coming as far as committing that early, a player of his caliber, committing anywhere that early. He did. He's flirted with so many other programs since then. He's scheduled officials. Then he said, well, no, actually, I don't know. I think I'm locked in. I think the notion that this is drama-free for the next 10 months would be very naive. If you're a Maryland fan, I have this conversation all the time with Ohio State fans. Like when Naheem Offord committed around this time last year to Ohio State, I said the notion that this is the last we hear about Naheem Offord, flirting with other programs is very naive. Don't fall into this. This is just the beginning. And sure enough, he flipped to Oregon at the last minute. Like this, the temperature of the Zion Ealy recruitment this spring, again, if he gets through the spring and then all the way through the month of June without visiting another program, I will be surprised. I know what he's saying. I know what, but he's also like, it's hard to go by what he's saying because he said two very different things within like a week or two of each other. And so there's no reason to think that the thing he just said could change again in 2 more weeks. So that is like, again, we are not going to do a lot of recruiting stuff on these because a lot of them, it's just not one of the 3 big things. But again, this is a very unique situation. And so keeping him off of college campuses elsewhere this spring is huge for Maryland. And I think this is huge for Mike Locksley's job security, because if you're not winning on the field and Zion Ely doesn't, is wavering and maybe not signing with you, then what is there left? Like, what is left at that point?
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I'm not suggesting that it's the best strategy, but I realize that I'm kind of probably sounding like I'm backtracking on what I said, but the traditional strategy of Maryland of like, get off to a good start and hold on for dear life, that might not be the worst thing for 2025 for Mike Locksley's job security. I mean, like, maybe getting to a bowl game will be sufficient in the eyes of the administration to keep him around. Maybe that will be enough to keep, like you said, Zion Ely and, Zahir Mathis and other talented players on the roster from exploring other options. But, right now, as we approach the spring, Maryland looks like they're going to be in for some rocky roads as it gets closer and closer to the beginning of the actual season. Yeah,
so that wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. I know I go into so many of these, like, glass half full, and it's like it's time for Maryland.
Yes.
Like, it's sink or swim for Maryland, for Mike Locksley this year, and I don't think there's any other way to put it. No matter which side of the fence you're on, who your favorite team is, what your thoughts are on Mike Locksley personally, like, this is a huge offseason and year coming up for Mike Locksley. So with that said, we'll wrap this one up. We've got more coming your way. Again, we're going team by team here before spring ball kicks off, looking at the 3 kind of pressing issues for every Big Ten squad. So hopefully you're enjoying that. You can support us and watch all these at youtube.com/@SaturdayGlory, or you can go on to your podcast platform of choice and search Around the Big Ten and listen there. We appreciate everyone's support, and we will be back here very soon with another one.